software engineering can be quite interesting, quite fulfilling, but also quite challenging. As we progress in our careers, we face even harder challenges. And one of the things that we have to face as we progress in our careers, or as we become more and more senior, it is expected of us to make technical decisions. And this can be quite challenging initially. And so I've been thinking about what are the things that we actually need to consider to be able to make sound technical decisions, and what we can do to better sell our ideas. So in this video, we're going to have a look at that. What are the 4 fundamental steps that we can take to be able to make better technical decisions and also better sell ideas? And before we actually start on the actual points, it's going to be important for us to understand why this is important. Why is making technical decisions and better selling our ideas is important? Well, for me personally, I think the number one reason is that the decisions we make, the software we build, has an impact on the company's bottom line. And this is extremely important, especially if you are working at a startup where perhaps the startup hasn't reached profitability. And the software that you build, the solutions, the decisions that we make ultimately would either cost us time and money. And what we want to do is, when we build software, we want to ensure that whatever solution we build solves the problem in hand, and that it has a positive impact on the company's bottom line, such that it can reach profitability and such that it can solve the customer's problems. And so making technical decisions is a core part of the work that we do the more and more senior we become. So the first thing that I wanted to talk about is a thing that is so core to our conversation that without it, it's going to be so much harder to be able to convince others that our arguments are better, or that our arguments are sound. And this is being able to identify facts. Facts are verifiable things, right? So we can verify that information is right. And here's an example. CI pipelines are taking about 45 minutes to run for our backend projects. That is a fact only because you verified that that is so. You've run the pipelines enough to know that on average, it takes around 45 minutes for the CI pipelines to run. It's different from, I feel that CI pipelines are taking too long. See, you haven't done anything to verify that that is true. It's not verifiable, because that's something that you feel, right? So maybe an engineer would run the pipelines 10 times or a couple of times and generate a report based on how long it takes to run, and then share that information with the rest of the team, and then propose like, hey, we can actually improve CI pipeline run times for our backend projects from 45 minutes to 15 minutes using X, Y, or Z. And it's also very important to be able to differentiate between facts, opinions, and feelings, because facts are going to be what is called to actually convince others that our arguments are sound. If it's just feelings and opinions, it's going to be much more difficult to actually convince others, especially other senior engineers, that this is the best way forward. A second and equally core aspect of making sound technical decisions, in my perspective, is being able to identify the priorities of the most important stakeholders of a given project, right? So you would ask yourself, who are the most important stakeholders of this project? What are their priorities? What are their expectations, right? What do they need? Ask yourself these questions and use this information to understand what their priorities are, and then align them with your own priorities. So that would essentially help you to gain alignment in the beginning based on what you understand is their priorities, and then using this to bolster your argument, right? So, for example, you have come to an understanding that the company wants to reach profitability. And so you know that the VP, the director of engineering, and essentially the company wants to be able to reach profitability. And you initiate an initiative to lower the costs of, for example, AWS services. You find that there is maybe an alternative, or there's something that we can do engineering wise to be able to lower the cost. From the perspective of the VP of engineering and the engineering team and maybe the executive team, this could be a valid decision, because you are essentially decreasing costs and ensuring that we can more quickly reach profitability. This could also involve maybe looking at what the customer is facing, what issues the customer is facing, and then trying to maybe build out a solution that would help in fixing those customer problems, and then delivering that solution to the customer and seeing how that impacts the company's bottom line. And perhaps that idea culminates in the company reaching profitability, right? But that only comes if you identify the priorities of others around you, or essentially the most important stakeholders, and use that information to bolster your argument. I think that's a very core part of making technical decisions. So after identifying facts and identify the priorities of the most important stakeholders, the third step would be to draw conclusions. This essentially means what it means. Taking the information that we've gathered from identifying facts and identifying the priorities of the most important stakeholders, putting that together, and then based on the problem or the situation or the context that we are in, using that to make a sound technical decision. Something that obviously impacts the company's bottom line, or that decreases costs, or that improves the ways of working of the team, or any other thing that you actually want to solve. So drawing conclusions is a very important part of the decision-making process. And this is essentially where you are thinking deeply about the problem at hand, using the information that you've gathered, and then leading to some conclusion. So some might think that it ends there, that it's the last step of the race, but it doesn't. There's a core and fundamental step in the decision-making process, and that is actually documenting the decision process. And when we speak about documenting the decision-making process, we want to keep as an artifact the reason why we made that decision. And we want to document what was the context in which we made that decision. We want to document what information we gathered and we used to propel us into making that decision. And maybe look at alternatives that we thought about, but we didn't go with, right? That we said, okay, based on this context, it wouldn't be useful at the moment to go with this alternative. Documenting this is going to be so important so that in the future, when someone looks at the past or looks at the decision and tries to understand, okay, why did they make the decision? Someone 4, 5, 6 years from now can actually get this document that describes fully what context you were in and why the decision was made. And there are various ways to document a technical decision. And one way that we have been using at the company I work for, and that I've been doing myself, is using an architecture decision record. It's essentially a document that helps you document the technical decision that you've made so that in the future you can come back to it and remind yourself of why the decision was made. But it's not only for you, it's for those who in the future want to understand why you made a technical decision and what the context was. So let's go back a bit and try to remind ourselves what the 4 steps are. What we want to do is be able to identify facts. We want to be able to identify the priorities of the most important stakeholders, and then we want to draw conclusions and document the conclusions using an architecture decision record or some other document type. So I think these are the fundamental steps that we need to follow to be able to make sound technical decisions, as well as better sell our ideas to the broader engineering team, to our own engineering team, so that it can have a positive impact on our ways of working as well as the company's bottom line. So if you like this video, subscribe and let me know how you feel in the comments below. I'm Alex once again. Until next time.